Change Connecting Generations webinar of today, hosting Dr. Emily Barker from the University of Southampton. My name is Jakub Bijak. I will be the host of today's webinar. I also work at the University of Southampton, and we've been working with Emily together for quite a few years now on different topics ranging from migration and migration scenarios and migration early warnings to interplay between migration and automation and labor markets. And Emily is a macroeconomist by background, so what you will hear about today will be a cross between demography and macroeconomics. So hopefully there will be something new and interesting for everyone. And the topic of today's talk is whether migration and automation, job automation, robotics can constitute possible solutions for the challenges of Europe's aging population. So we'll have the talk for about half an hour or so, and then there will be time for questions. Once we get to that point, I mean, feel free to write down your questions on the chat, or then once we get to the discussion, feel free to raise your hands and we will go through the questions as they come. So without further ado, Emily, delighted to have you on today's program. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you to the CPC for the invite to do this presentation. And so we're going to talk about some of the recent research that we've done about potential solutions for the aging problem. So there we go. So this presentation will include a background to the research topic. So we've got some aging migration, and then we'll talk about the labour market, and then also what is a robot. Some of Europe's challenges. I know there are quite a lot of challenges at the minute, but in context of this paper anyway. And then I'll go into the theoretical model, which is the main contribution of this paper, and then finish off with some relevance to policy. So as demographers, we know that migration cannot solve the aging problem. For a reminder though, and some context, here are some maps that I produced. So on the left-hand side, we've got the old age dependency ratio. So these values were from 2023. The yellow indicates the highest, which is a particular problem, as you can see from these that are highlighting Finland, Italy, and Portugal. So yeah, Southern Europe has a particular problem with this, and also with the data that you may be familiar with. In the long run, it's expected to be a problem for the Eastern countries as well. So not so much the Nordic and Western. We'll move on to that on the next slide a bit. But then on the right-hand side, there is the percentage of the foreign-born population. So this scale is inverted. So yellow is highlighting the problem areas, if you like, where the percentage of the foreign-born population is the lowest. So there are two complete anomalies in this map, Switzerland and Luxembourg. So yeah, their reasons are known. But when we're trying to link, say, oh, will migration solve the aging problems? Because these maps don't perfectly correlate, we can see that they're not going to be a solution. I know fertility rates, which touch on in a minute, will come into this. So moving on to that, here is some more maps that this was part of the project done, and this is looking at the population change with respect to the year 2100. The green highlights where there is going to be a positive population change, and red where there's a negative. As you can see, there's a significant difference. On the map that's on the left, this is with migration. And on the right, it's where there isn't migration. So this is also where the fertility rate is particularly coming into play. And with migration, we can see that the northern countries, particularly the UK, Norway, Sweden, Ireland, okay, the UK, less Scotland, yeah. And then parts of the other Western European countries. So these are on the localized regions, not just on a national level, which is why there's some different colours within each country. They tell a very different story between them. So without migration, nearly every region has negative population growth. There's parts of Ireland, parts of Paris, and then little bits of Romania. Other than that, it's all red and negative. So we're facing a massive demographic and labour market problem, which is what we'll focus on today. So one of the things that is contributed to this paper and not done so much in demography is robots. So what do we think of as robots? We've got on the left the human-like replacement, which we are all taught to be or presumed to be quite scared of, and even this robot, which is meant to be nice and friendly, does look a bit creepy. And then on the right hand side we had the image of how robots are replicating our jobs, but in reality on a wider scale they're much more than that. Excuse me. Any type of robot or AI is a labour saving technology, where labour saving can come in various forms. So robots can work independently or they can be collaborative. There we go. So what about the reality? So we have the good or optimistic view where AI and robots are going to take the boring parts of our jobs. So we can do what we specialise in and like. There is also the opposite view where AI and robots are going to take our jobs and make our working lives harder, whether it's completely removing the jobs we train for, or we're going to have to spend lots of time upskilling and just having to deal with the problems that they cause. We're all familiar with computers and not working or not doing what we like. So just imagine this on a bigger scale. But in reality, it's going to be a mix of it. AI and robots will take some of our jobs or some of the tasks that they can do, but we're still going to be here. If you think back over the last 70 or so years where robots have gone through, oh, it's going to make our lives so much easier, we'll have leisure time. But then when the robots started to arrive, especially in the 70s in the manufacturing industry, people became scared of them. But each time, whether it be computers, the internet, every type of new version of the industrial revolution, if you'd like, we're still here. Our jobs have changed, but it is important to remember we're still here and we're still getting tasks to do. One aspect that is worth a quick mention is the skill downgrading aspect that can be used to change what jobs might be for different skill levels. So there are some types of technologies that are designed to take, for example, tasks that can currently only be done by high skill workers to make them accessible to medium skilled workers, and then also the same for medium skill workers to low skill, which will provide different opportunities for some countries, which we'll talk about more later on. Then, so this is a simple example. I borrowed this from somebody, a post that I found on LinkedIn. This is an AI generated image that sort of takes in part of the past and the future. So you've got a human and a toaster. The idea that we can take from this is that humans do what they're good at and machines can do what they're good at. If I'm trying to heat a piece of bread, it's not going to go very well. I have to use this type of machine, but if you just put the bread in the toaster, it's not going to do anything without you putting it down. And in the context of generating this image, the author could not just say, oh, create me an image of, I can't remember what he put, but it was like, create me an image of this. He had to say, oh, I want a human, I want a toaster, and I want a human operating the toaster. Whereas if I was having to do this personally, I'd just take a picture of myself and say, oh, here's a piece of bread, here's me using a toaster with thumbs up and hoping for the best. So the lesson we can take from this is different scales of we can't do many tasks alone, and it's just taking the best of both worlds, if you like. So let's take some numbers of technology to the topic in hand. So on the left-hand side, there's a map that has robots per 10,000 workers, an industrial type robot. So there's a strong link with the car industry. So Germany is the leader in Europe, closely followed by Sweden, which links to their cars and manufacturing industries. There's also a slight spillover from the Volkswagen Group to in some of the neighbouring Eastern countries. Denmark comes a lot from the pharmaceuticals, and then you've got the likes of Italy who had some from food packaging. So different types of industries spread across Europe. You don't from this get a traditional view of the economic development of different regions of Europe. Whereas on the right-hand side, this is a map of the AI preparedness. The AI is going towards the future. This is a statistic calculated by the IMF, and this covers countries' preparedness for the future technologies, taking into account of the existing digital infrastructure, the existing human capital, the labour market policies, the innovation and economic integration and regulation. So when you've got the Nordic countries and the Western, they're the leaders of it. Denmark is actually second in the world, only Singapore ranks above. And the majority of the top 10 countries are from the EU, or the EU plus, because we've got Switzerland there as well. So it's a good outlook for it, but you can then also see from the darker regions in the south and in the east that there are problems going forward, particularly with the southern countries who are certainly starting to lag behind their traditional Europe, or what you'd associate with more economic developed countries. You can even split the Baltics from the eastern countries. Estonia is known to be quite going forward with it. So that explains a bit of the difference that you might see from there. And the Balkans are far behind. Of the EU countries, Hungary, part of the east, is the worst ranked in preparedness. So if we're then looking at the jobs of what might be most threatened, or how we're according to this into our research, the best way to utilize this in our analysis is how robots will change our jobs. So we'll break them down by skill. Whichever skill level, there's a lot of heterogeneity, especially for the high and medium skill, which distinguishes more vulnerable careers from less vulnerable. So when you've got low skill, these are traditionally associated where you don't need much training, just go straight in and do it. Medium skill, you're needing some qualifications, whether it would just be upper secondary or post-secondary, but which is less than tertiary. You're then starting to need some experience, and these aspects are not just perfectly replicatable by robots. And then high skill, you've got tertiary education, this advanced level of knowledge, specialization, things that humans are really good at and robots can't do. So if we have a context of this, the map shows the percentage of the population aged 25 to 64 with ICED level 0 to 2. So that is where you've got no education, primary or only lower secondary education. By mapping this, we're able to see where the problems for some countries lie. Sorry, the lighter colour, the yellow, is the highest proportion and darkest is the smallest proportion. The colours from this show how the southern countries, Italy, Portugal and Spain, have significant problems with lower education. Using this map, we can then look forward and match up going towards policy, the problems and the opportunities to robots that you can have. So when you've got these low skill workers, these are high risk of job displacement, typically because you think not much qualification, so you can replicate their jobs with robots. They, without much foundation education, they're going to have more challenges to upskilling. But they do have the opportunities, so they are able to reskill and can make use of the technologies that are going to downskill some medium skill jobs, but also with the emphasis on education that is part of the EU 2020 scheme, and then to the 2030 is getting people more educated. So there is some focus on that. Of these careers, some of the least vulnerable are the ones that have the human factors, such as childcare, whereas the most vulnerable are ones that are easy and inexpensive, at least relatively, to automate. So if you think of the Amazon warehouses or packaging or things of that nature where they can be done by robots. If we then look at the medium scale, which tends to make up the majority of the population, this time the yellow highlights where most of them are or had the highest proportion. So this is trying to highlight the problem areas. There is also still a high rate of displacement with the I'm sorry, I got together on that just looking down. So you're still able to see some of the problems for it. This is with the medium skill, you're starting to introduce job transformation rather than elimination. Again, you've got the need to upskill throughout your career, and then learning to manage the different systems. And so you're looking to hopefully have the combination of younger and older workers taking the experience and knowledge that they gain from it. The least vulnerable careers tend to be ones which involve a lot of dexterity and a human factor. So you think of plumbers, all the intricate parts that they have to do, they are least likely to be replaced. But the ones that are most vulnerable are ones that require precision. So for example, jewelers, and others such as data entry, where you can now get machines to read various different aspects and going forward. So ones that can have easily replicatable tasks. So from this, we see that from the map, sorry, we see that the Eastern countries had the strongest or highest proportion of medium skill workers, and a strength of these countries is that a lot of them are vocational skills rather than just general, which gives a specialized task such as plumbers. We tend to have an association with these specialized skills with it, and this is one of the strengths that they have. Now we're looking at tertiary education. So this also has points out Italy's problem in the fact that they have a very low percentage of highly educated workers. Ireland, sorry, is quite high in this. They're an anomaly as well, in the sense that they now have more than 50% of 25 to 64-year-olds having a tertiary education, which just having a tertiary education is not oh, that's great, it's fantastic. You have to take into account where their qualification is. So if it's something that can be easily replaced by AI, or ones that don't have much application going forward, these are ones that don't make their qualification irrelevant but struggle to match up to what the labour market needs. So these type of careers are going to make the most advanced use of AI and computers going forward. So these will hopefully allow the people with these qualifications to focus on the creativity, ethics, and the strategy. This is part of what AI struggles with, because ultimately the machines can only know what we program them to. And with all the international, for example, legal systems, you cannot completely rely on a robot or AI to be able to satisfy all these requirements. So when we take this to our model, we're actually going to combine the low skill and the medium education levels, simply because it's so complex. And due to the nature of the model, this makes more sense, and to be able to match up to the models or type of robots that we're going to use. So you can still see that Italy has quite a problem with the lack of high skill workers, but I keep mentioning Italy because it's one of our case studies that I'll talk about later. So quickly before I move on, is one of the challenges that Europe faces is with their productivity and the existing labour force. Before Trump's tariffs came in the news in the UK, we had a push for wanting to increase employment rates. Ours in the UK is actually quite low, but it's not only the UK that has a problem. And it's the problem that will go forward with the ageing is that we're losing more of the workforce, and there's going to be the higher dependency on those that are actually working to be able to make the economy function. So one of the forecasts of Italy is that more than half of the population will be a dependent. That is not sustainable when you've got so many people depending on a shrinking population. So keeping people not only participating and active is getting them employed. This then reduces your dependency on migration. The other one is labour productivity growth. So this is sort of a bit hidden in the news, but it does keep appearing in that I know the UK is missing, but our productivity growth is very, very small and is just as much a problem as all the dark areas on the map. Ireland's an anomaly because of the financial crisis that had a negative effect, so 2010, so it looked quite low. But going forwards, there is some, or the prosperous disclosed East is still going forward from when they joined the EU and had access to the different economic benefits that come with being with that, but this will start slowing. So they are getting to the part of marginal returns. So even though they had the lighter colours, it's a problem that needs to be fixed across the continent and the world. So it's something that Trump likes to go on about, and while I'm not agreeing with him on anything, there is a problem that has come from other countries as well to make use of technologies to improve this so we can keep growing as an economy, which is that what it comes down to. So I'll move on to the theoretical model. So I've given an overview of the background, and what I'm using is a DSG model. So it's a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium. This uses micro foundations where agents make their decisions to optimize various aspects. And we use a lot of the data that I presented so far, calibration and more. I could do a whole presentation on the calibration, it's so extensive. But in DSG models, we're focusing on two main actors. So you've got the firms and the households. I will go on to the case studies in the analysis. So we use Germany, Sweden, Italy and Poland to represent the 4 regions that we typically split the EU into. And then we'll do a bit of model analysis, summarization of it. So having said that, we'll start with the households in the model. So this figure looks quite complex, but it's how we break down our households in that we want to incorporate the older generation or the early retirees. So if we start with the first level is I'm breaking it down into high and low skill. On the second level, we have natives and migrants. And then to the age, we have working age and the early retirees. So part of introducing this early retirees into the model is making use of that extra workforce that is starting to retire. So these DSG models tend to look at a 5-year horizon. So within that, the population shares are not going to change a huge amount, but we can utilize different policies to see how they work, keeping these people active in the labour force slightly longer, or how the technologies may change. When we come to the firm, they are using high skill and low skill inputs. So the high skill input is the high skill labour, and then also capital. These two inputs are complementary, so they're working together and making making it better and improving one another. The low skill input, the substitutability between robots and low skill workers is up for debate. Are they perfect substitutes, complements, imperfect? In this model, I use them as perfect substitutes. There are reasons for this, but just you can argue it different ways. We did use different approaches to it, but for this presentation, I'm using them where they're perfect substitutes. So how do firms decide when to use a robot versus when to have a worker? So there is this threshold level X at which the firm would decide to get a robot. So this situation is occurring when they are needing to get either a worker or a robot. When the threshold level exceeds X, they're going to buy a robot. And if they do buy this robot, the vacancy is then removed. But if the level for which a robot would be purchased is less than the threshold level, they're going to post a vacancy so that in the next period they can hire a worker. Given this model overview, I'm now going to have a the analysis section of it. So there are two parts to this. The stochastic analysis, where I'm going to increase factors within the model. So we're going to look at migration and automated productivity. And then the deterministic analysis, this is a what if situation. What if we change this? We'll look at the working age labour force participation rates, the early retirees, and then also the robots per 10,000 workers. So in this first one, it's the responses to the automation productivity. It's a 1 standard deviation increase, and the impulse responses, what happens after the shock, are shown in percentage terms. These show the employment of the different skill levels and also the participation rates. In the full analysis, we find that GDP, or the output, increases. The high skill wages increase. The low skill wages, which is what people tend to fear, do decrease slightly on impact, but after a year or 18 months, they tend to then increase above the steady state level. So when I'm saying about an automated productivity increase, this is each robot is making more for the same input. You're able to do more. Think of the software update on your computer or a new program that allows you to do more if it was a high skill worker. The different colour lines and types of the lines are representing the households, so it's more relevant when we're looking at the migration shock. However, when it's the when it's a dashed line versus solid line, this is the aging aspect of it. We've got the different how households choose whether to be active. So when we're looking at the size of the responses, or the size of the axes are normalized. However, we see that when the robots per 10,000 workers, the rate at which this is calibrated is smaller, the responses are bigger for the Italy and Poland, who had significantly lower robot rates than either Germany or Sweden. Importantly, the effects of the high skill versus low skill is different. Employment does increase, but also for the low skill workers, the employment does decrease slightly for some countries, but increase for others. There is an increase in the participation rates, except for the low skill older workers, which in the first 18 months decreases and then will increase once the new technology has been adapted and there's some more complementarity between the workers that spreads across. It is important to recognise that an increase in participation is important because it's giving a new workforce that the firms then have access to, which when we're looking at struggling labour markets, not having enough workers, depending on migration to fill gaps, that is important to recognise. The second stochastic analysis is looking at migration. So this was, can migration solve the ageing problem? From different aspects, you see that's no, because there is still gaps left in the market analysis. So when there is migration, this is to both high and low skill households in this figure, GDP increases. However, we note that with Poland, because the existing percentage of the foreign-born population is so small, there is essentially no effect. Though on the Poland sub-figure, the red line is the foreign-born, which increases because it's, oh, here's great. So yes, you're going to get a bit more, but it's such a small to begin with. That's why it appears. The participation and employment both increase. The important link with this is migration can actually cause productivity increases as well. So that is when migrants tend to have complementary skills that, even though they may be perfect substitutes with or perfect complement, whichever way you'd rather say it, with natives, you're getting these different qualifications that might help them. The migrants are filling existing gaps, but not completely. So if we look at a deterministic analysis, this what if happens, then this first one is the working age participation, which is problems in lots of countries. To calculate this, what I did was use the highest participation rate of each gender. The unemployment rate doesn't really change, but it is nearly always the case that the participation rate of the female is lower than the male. So while this is not a perfect replication, it does give an idea of how the labour market would change and the output consequently. So Germany and Sweden actually had quite low differences between the male and female and high participation rates anyway. So while there are gains in the labour force, the total labour supply would increase by 5% and 4% respectively. The increases in GDP are only about 1.4 and 1.1% respectively. But significantly, if we look at Italy and Poland, who had lower participation rates anyway, there are huge gains to be found from this, particularly for Italy, who the labour supply, where low skill is a significant factor in this, could see GDP increases of around 5%, which even in accounting terms is significant. And with the Italian labour market struggling as it is, it provides a valuable resource that the country can look to. There is always the biggest impact in the low skill sectors, which other country look at because of the characteristics associated with those. Now, if we look at the early retiree participation, so this is a bit more complex. We are able to see the drop-offs between 55 to 64 and then also 65 to 74. So what I do is I calibrate this as if the population of the participation rate of 65 to 74 is the same as that for the whole of the 55 to 74. This is reactivating or keeping active the older workforce. Now, if we take it to real life, this is not saying that they have to work full-time Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, because we know that's not practical. When we look at the data, there is a official retirement age, but then an effective retirement age, which is always below, whether it's people taking early retirement or different fact, just working part-time. So this data incorporates the full-time and part-time working, but nevertheless, by keeping the workforce active for longer, there are some gains. And while they are smaller than activating or increasing the participation rates of the working age, there are still some gains to be had. They're not perfectly replicatable of what would happen in real life because we can only do so much in this model. But it is important to say there are gains. And again, this is with low skill because on average, they tend to retire earlier. The multiple socioeconomic reasons. And then the last one, this is completely hypothetical, as if the substitution between high skill and low skill workers with the robots would have to change because of wage premiums. So take this with a massive pinch of salt, but it's to demonstrate how robots would increase the production. So you've got insignificant changes to the low skill wage, which I mentioned before is something that is quite concerning, that people, when they fear robots, this is what's going to happen. It's not significant. The reason for the increases being higher in the countries of which there are a higher level of robots is because the countries with lower levels, they're not as productive as they are. So even though they had the rates, they are further behind in the development and use of them. So the greater the increase in robots, you then have the greater increase in GDP. So high skill workers benefit somewhat, and we just see that the more that it's utilized, the greater opportunities there are. So with these case studies, what have we learned? So yes, I taught parts about the model, but we're also accounting for the use of downskilling robots as well, which is important to remember with this. These are all going to take into account the existing labour market, the complements with the existing labour market. So Germany, they can invest in the high skill robots and AI, which is where they have particular shortage. They're trying to target their migration programs towards high skill workers. And then increasing vocational training is towards thinking of higher level vocational training. So you're taking parts from university courses towards students who may not be able to do a full university course in, for instance, physics, but they can do parts of it because they like robotics. So it's making these accessible to more people. Sweden, they have some of the problem, same targets that they can have, but their biggest opportunity is in medium skill education. So they also have one of the largest bases of AI and tech firms as well. Because you think of the likes of Spotify, they have actually had to move a lot of their, not production, but some of their company use what is existing in the US. So given what is now happening there, Europe has the potential to bring that talent back, so reverse the brain drain that they had. Italy, they need to really focus on upskilling their workers. That high level of low educated workers is something that is going to be a massive problem going forwards. And the activation in the workforce as a result from those numbers, which are almost quite scary, to see how it is. But then also invest in these productivity enhancing robots, which will be really good for them. Poland, they had the opportunity going all of it. Yes, there is a financial problem that we have to consider with these, but they had a good setup of the vocational qualifications, which can help them going forward to go with this skill specialization. So what about lessons? So this also is looking at the jobs that can be downgraded. Important to take from this is that lifelong learning is going to be required. Yes, it may not be the most fun to think, although we're going to have to keep learning throughout our careers, but as technology changes quicker and quicker, to keep ourselves relevant and going with it and make us a good employee, we're going to have to do it, unfortunately. There will become new professions, just as some are going to be replaced by robots and AI, new ones will occur. So whether it's just maintaining robots or developing with AI software, there are skills and opportunities that are there for low skill workers, medium skill workers, and high skill workers, which altogether we're focusing on probably going to be specialization to make use of this shrinking workforce, which is the best outcome for us. But what about in the future? So identifying the biggest problem for each of the countries is key. So Italy's was that labour market participation and the low skill. We're trying to maximize the existing workforce, which is a problem, especially now in the southern countries and going to become the rest of Europe eventually. So when we're looking at promoting reskilling throughout the entire careers, we're going to have to be learning this new tech and make use of the older and younger workers working together to benefit the older workers' experience with the younger workers' knowledge from the recent courses they've been on and been able to adapt with technology. Because if we think about how it is shown on TV, it was like older workers, oh, here, just give it the younger person, just fix it. I don't know what you're doing, just fix it. Whether it's connecting Wi-Fi or doing something, it's just, oh, here, fix it. Whether it was Clarkson on the farm show giving it to Caleb, just give it a teenager. It's all that. Or how many people have given it to their kids to think, oh, you can do it, it's easier for you. We're going to promote applied careers and qualifications, which is part of the taking the university courses, which has the added benefit of reducing the years that are completely in education and being inactive in the labour market. So you can be spending 2 or 3 days at college and the rest of the week in the labour force. And an important factor is supporting startups and advancements in European-driven technologies. So with the US's rising anti-immigration sentiments and funding problems that they're going to face, there's the opportunity for that, bringing those workers back and getting their ideas. So there's lots to digest in all of this, and thank you for listening. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please ask now.